Childhood can create all kinds of negative patterns. If you grow up in an environment where you're learning negative ways of behaving, taking on negative beliefs, these patterns, these beliefs and ways of behavior can become unconscious. You don't even know any different, because if that's what you've experienced all your life, that's going to be how you believe people behave, how you believe you should behave. Inner child work is about connecting with your inner child, releasing toxic shame, giving yourself self-love, self-acceptance, making these unconscious ways of being conscious, and actually breaking these patterns. You don't have to have grown up in extreme dysfunction to benefit from inner child healing. Just growing up in an environment where there's a lot of arguing, child's going to internalize that. They're going to think it means there's something wrong with them. It's going to create toxic shame. And abandonment trauma doesn't just come from your parents throwing you in a ditch and speeding away. Abandonment trauma can come from being enmeshed by a parent, being forced to take on an adult role in your relationship with a parent, taking on a carer role for younger siblings, or a parent with addiction or mental health issues. This is still a form of abandonment. So most people grow up with some form of dysfunction, but they learn to downplay it. They think that inner child work is about blaming their parents. It's about, saying that they had a terrible childhood, that their parents were abusers in some way. Inner child work isn't about blaming parents. Everyone is doing the best they can with what they have. Most people are going to parent the way they were parented. If a child is growing up in this kind of dysfunctional environment, they don't want to see their parents as bad, so they're going to internalize the dysfunction. They're going to see themselves as bad. They're going to see themselves as faulty in some way. A child is going to need to adopt strategies to cope with their toxic shame, and these strategies that a child adopts to cope with their toxic shame aren't going to serve them as an adult, because when they were a child, they adopted those things, and a child can't make the best life choices. So these strategies, these ways of coping with toxic shame become toxic to a person once they reach adulthood. They're going to cause them to get into dysfunctional relationships, to act out, become narcissistic and abusive, or act in through self-harm, addictions. They may cause them to be people pleasers or codependents, to put other people's needs before their own, to get a sense of self-worth from serving other people. The strategies a child adopts is going to create all kinds of negative patterns for them as an adult. So inner child work can help to overcome traumatic events from childhood. Traumatic events can leave the inner child wounded, feeling unsafe, unworthy, unable to trust others. The adult with a wounded inner child may develop coping strategies such as avoidance, dissociation, or maladaptive behaviours to suppress their toxic shame and deal with these unhealed inner child wounds. If a child grows up with a lack of affection or validation, the child's going to learn to validate themselves by treating themselves the same way they were treated by parents or caregivers. If they're not receiving validation from their parents and caregivers, they won't be able to validate themselves as adults. If they're receiving invalidation, if they've got very narcissistic parents who are calling them names, putting them down, they're going to internalize that. It's going to create a negative inner voice that will continue to attack and put them down and invalidate them the same way their parent has treated them. It's going to be a negative inner voice that's going to tell them the same things that abusive adult has told them. This kind of negative self-talk can also develop in adulthood. If you spend a long time in an abusive relationship as an adult, you can internalize the abuser. But as a child, your neuroplasticity is at its highest, so that is when you're going to be most susceptible to it. So this kind of emotional neglect can lead to an adult with a wounded inner child suffering difficulties forming relationships, maybe having a deep sense of unworthiness. So such an adult is going to struggle to validate themselves. They're going to have to look outside of themselves for validation. And any attention is better than no attention. So if that adult can't get positive validation, they may take on toxic behaviours as a way to get attention from others. Conditional love is probably the most common wound that people will develop as children. A child needs unconditional love. They need to know that they're loved and accepted no matter what. But because parents carry their own wounds, because they're going to be parenting the way they were parented, they're not going to be capable of giving the child unconditional love. Most parents can only offer conditional love. They can only say, if you fulfill this role, I will love you. If you do well at school, I will love you. If you're a good boy or girl, I will love you. And conditional love can still be traumatizing, and it can cause a child to take on family roles such as perfectionist or superachiever. The inner child may develop the belief that they're only worthy of love if they're fulfilling that role. This can lead to perfectionism, people-pleasing, chronic self-doubt. Such an adult will struggle to express their genuine needs, feelings, and showing their authentic self. And this can lead to further wounding. This can lead to taking on even more toxic shame, from even more suppression of the authentic self, putting on a mask, being someone else, being someone that you think people want you to be. Because if you are authentic, you won't receive any affection or acceptance, love from the people in your life. Children model the behaviour they witness from their parents. They're looking to their parents to help them understand the world, understand themselves, to understand what relationships should look like, how people should treat each other, how they should behave. Such a child will internalize the beliefs and behaviours that they witness from their parents. If parents exhibit negative patterns such as anger, addictions, emotional unavailability, the child is going to adopt those maladaptive strategies. An adult with this kind of wounded inner child is going to perpetuate the cycle, as they're going to rely on those maladaptive strategies they learned in childhood, and they're going to teach them to their own children. When a child doesn't receive sufficient emotional support, guidance and validation, they're going to grow into an adult who feels unsure of the world, unsure of how to navigate life's challenges. The absence of a nurturing, supportive environment can leave the wounded inner child feeling lost, powerless, and such an adult will be unable to develop healthy coping strategies. Such an adult will be unable to develop healthy self-regulation skills. This can lead to many difficulties in adulthood, such as poor decision-making skills, maybe having to look to others to help you make decisions, not trusting your own judgment, interpersonal struggles, and an inability to self-soothe. Understanding the origins of a wounded inner child and becoming conscious of toxic and maladaptive coping strategies that have been adopted in childhood is a start. Awareness is the first step to overcoming these issues. It's the first step to improving relationships, including your relationship with yourself, to overcoming anxiety, reintegrating emotions. It can allow an individual to begin the process of healing. But understanding is only the beginning. Inner child work is about more than just understanding. To fully break the cycle of these negative patterns, to fully release toxic shame and toxic coping strategies, an individual needs to become a good enough parent to themselves. They need to give themselves unconditional love, unconditional acceptance. They need to be able to make themselves feel safe, feel secure, to know that they're good enough no matter what. They can do this by writing letters to their inner child, writing letters from their inner child to their adult self, by visualizing themselves connecting with their inner child, giving their inner child that love and acceptance.